Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. Okay, today we're starting the last three chapters of Book 4. Chapter 14, 15, and 16 will be dealt with over these next three sessions. This is the, a lot of Aristotle says here he's going to talk about creating a regime. But he can't really do that. This is not really establishing a regime. This is the mistake. He's promising to give this to us here, right? He just ended that and he kind of summarized what he did. He kind of summed up everything he did up to the point. And I think in many ways, the end of 13 is the ending of book 4. In many ways, the end of and this is one of the problems of the politics, is that because so many times it's been edited and things, and there's a lacana, which means bits of text that looks either inserted or moved. There's the whole problem of the end of book 3, which the first sentence of it, the last sentence of it is the first sentence of book 7. The idea that maybe book 7 should follow book 3, the question of the ordering. We've been reading the more traditional approach, which saw 4, 5, and 6, which are what I call Aristotle's regime science, the science of the practical regimes, read before we look at 7 and 8, which is about the regime we would pray for. But some would argue we should read that first. Okay, this is the whole crux of it, the whole kind of this. And in fact, we in many parts of the text we had this. We looked at some of the notes that Lord uses here, and when he points to the different manuscripts editions and the different editors attempting to make certain arguments for other things. Why certain bits of text are blocked and why certain maybe some things are added because there's kind of issues in the text. Okay, um, I it's very odd that he wraps up at the end of 13, but will not wrap up at the end of. Well, let's go look. Let's go do kind of like a zoop 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 through here, right? This is 15 and no kind of a summary here. Like he just ends up with this. He just ends here where at 13, we'll go back here and I'll show it to you. You see it right there. Okay, I'm sorry. There's 13. Sorry. He gives us that summary at the end of it, right? We get that summary of what has happened. Okay, so now we want to say, remember 13. 13 was the really long thing. Yeah, okay. Mea culpa, mea culpa. Um, Actually, it was 2:11 was the long one, right? And I think we had 45, 50 minutes next last two. But well, let's look at this. So therefore, what is this? This is the institution. This is a discussion first. We're talking about the offices, right? He'll talk about the deliberate. I think the deliberative offices. We'll talk about this. The question of the offices and the division of labor of the political system, the politics. This is the first, in many ways, this is the first kind of attempt to kind of understand the different functions. Now, he mentioned these things at the beginning of 4. And in book 4, chapter 4, we talked about the offices, right? He talked about the parts of the city. And he talked about the necessary of that there's going to be the magisterial offices. Then he talked about the deliberative offices, and then the adjudicative offices, the courts, right? And I think this is important to understand. This is where the first, in many ways, the first account of the division of labor of the political, what would become the so-called division of power in modern language, right? Um, now, In modern language, the division of power is divided in the idea of the legislative versus executive, right? And then the courts. With Locke treating the judicial tied to the legislative, right? This division of powers in terms of this. Now, it's Montesquieu who makes the argument. Now, it's not really original to Montesquieu. It goes all the way back to the Romans. That the Romans themselves, the Republic, and they created the Republic. They divided the power up of the king, the Rex, in order to prevent, to prevent monarchy. They created two consuls, not one, so that the magisterial power or the and they even took the broke aspects, the lector, right, the fasces, the symbols of the fasces, the axe and the bundle of sticks, right. They purposefully the lectors, which carried the sticks around it, right. The symbol of the republic, the fasces, was purposely designed to represent the republic, the people in the Senate, SPQR, the Senate and the people of Rome. Um, now, Rome divided power because it feared the Rex. Okay, the idea that all power was within the helm of the king. So, king, the symbol of the monarchy, is the symbol of Rex, and kingship is the thing of unitary rule, and that political rule is kind of, there's division of labor. There is a division of labor that emerges. Um, Now, of course, modern monarchies eventually will diverge power in order to be more effective, but they're exercising usually when a thing exercises authority, it exercises not its own authority, but it exercises the authority of the crown, right? So we have a division of power argument. That Montesquieu makes this argument in his Spirit of the Laws as an argument that how to prevent despotism. And I think this is a Roman argument. The Romans likewise. They feared that the despotic character of the Rex, and they wanted to maintain free government as a republic, the republic, by dividing power. Okay, and therefore the idea Montesquieu makes the argument is that we need to divide power in order to do this. Now, this is not Aristotle's argument. Aristotle's argument here is one of how to get things done. The question of what is to be done here. That's why the division of powers is as much a derivative of the division of labor. In other words, we divide it. In other words, as political governments, as institutions evolve, as they grow from a small little village, a small little polis to a bigger polis, you have a problem. You need more offices. You need people. The one man ruler, the guy who you elected king can't do it all, and there becomes the need for magistrates, offices to do various functions and to divide the functions up. So let's go looking at. We start out with the first thing in chapter 14. So let's look at this. Let us speak of what comes next, again, both generally and separately for each regime, taking the beginning point that is appropriate to it. So we're going to read. So it's a new beginning, and looking at the beginning point of what begins about comes what comes up here. He says, there are then three parts in all regimes. So this is, there are three parts in all regimes with respect to which the excellent lawgiver must attempt to discern what is advantageous for each. So again, he's going to talk about three parts. Now, before a couple chapters earlier, he talked about, in every regime there's going to be tied to the question of quantity and quality, right? This is something different. This is function. This is the function structure. And this is what every excellent lawgiver, okay? And by excellent, I think he means, yes, it's Budios, which this Budios lawgiver, the serious lawgiver, must attempt to discern what is advantageous for each. So, in other words, what is advantageous for each regime? Okay, in other words, what is the order? How do you order them? As long as these are in a fine, a colosse, a beautiful condition, The regime is necessary in a beautiful condition, and regimes necessarily differ from one another as a result of differing in each of these parts. So he's going to be saying that this is now the institutional understanding of how you understand the regimes and how they're going to differ from each other. In other words, there's going to be these all regimes have these three parts. He says, okay. In other words, and it goes all the way back. It goes all the way back to that chapter at the end, second part of the discussion of the parts of the city. They need to have They need magistrates. There needs to be magisterial magistrates, officers, people who do things, execute things. The deliberative element, that which decides, and the adjudicative, to settle disputes, to adjudicate disputes and issues of things like crimes against the gods. In other words, the crimes against murder is the crime against the gods, right? Um, Other issues of violations of oaths and actions against the city, disputes among citizens for the civic peace. In other words, the lawsuits and disputes. Adjudication. So to adjudicate means to settle disputes, to rule on things that we have to judge regarding the law or disputes among the citizens. So therefore, we have these, and the question is, we have to order them, these parts, order them and arrange them and make them what is beautiful. In other words, kalos means noble, good, just, fitting. It fit. It's the right one, the right way for that place. Okay, and that if the regime is going to be in a fine condition, he argues that regimes will necessarily differ from another one because of these parts. So therefore, the different regimes will have a different relation. These parts will be in different relations from each different regime. So this is the institutionalism of Aristotle. Here we get into the structure and division of the division of the offices and structures and how they differ from regime to regime. Right? He says of these three things, one is the part that deliberates about common matters. So that's the first part, the part that deliberates about common matters. Means this is the deliberative element. This is the one that decides. This is who decides. This is and if we use the famous line, this is why sovereignty makes the problem here. The sovereign is he who decides, right? That's the famous line from Schmidt, right? Carl Schmidt, the German jurist. Um, Here, there's no concept of sovereignty in this sense. In other words, the ruler. You could say maybe the one who decides is the ruler. Yeah. The plutuma, the ruling part, is the part that probably will exercise decision. But again, how they form it and shape it, what will be constituted as part of the plutuma, the governing part. Okay, we always remember that sense, the patuma is that part which has ruling is the authoritative element within the regime. Patuma, go back in book 3, the patuma and the regime are almost, they say the same, but they're not. It's this orders that, this shapes the regime, and the regime shapes the plotea, shapes the polis, right? So therefore, there is this interconnection, and the ruling part, the part that rules, the part that is governing, the part that has authority, exercise authority, um, is going to have the shape of who the officers are. So, particularly the deliberative officers, the ones who will decide. So therefore, the first, the deliberative officers, right, in common matters. The second is connected with the officers. Okay, that is with the that is which offices there should be. So what needs to be done, right? Over what matters they should have authority, and in what fashion that the choice of the person to fill them should occur. And third, the adjudicative part. Right, those are the three. No, we have right here. This is where the division of labor is. The division of labor. We need to have the deliberative element, the one who makes decisions concerning common matters. We traditionally Um, the modern tradition would call this the legislative. This is what the modern division of labor theory, starting with Hobbes and Locke and Rousseau, starts out with the legislative. Um, and the next, the offices, which we would that would call the executive. Now he doesn't have this. In other words, and there's no this. And actually, this is interesting. This is the actually this is something that Harvey Mansfield in his article "Taming" in the book "Taming of the Prince," which is basically it's his book about executive power. It's his kind of I call it his version of Carl Schmitt's dictatorship. Now, dictatorship is people misunderstand dictatorship. Dictatorship is about sovereign executive authority and the history of it. It's a history by Schmitt. I think this is one of the most important books. Carl Schmitt's Dictatorship is one of the most important books that should be read about executive authority in modern political thought. Next to it, as a good summary, before it only came available like this past decade in English. It was available in German for a long time, but in English, it only in the last 10 years it was commonly available, and it's still kind of considered. Oh, it's about no. It's kind of like it's misunderstood. It's a very important book to understand the idea of executive authority and and the question of the scope of executive authority. Mansfield's Taming of the Prince is a similar book, but it's not, it's kind of more broader and it's more kind of tied with the kind of Straussian view of how the history of political thought operates. And it deals with the ancients in a way. He has that chapter on Aristotle's missing executive, right? I think this is questionable. I think he's right. And in Robert Faulkner, in his chapter in the volume celebrating, it was published at, it was a conference given at University of Richmond celebrating I think it's the, 30th anniversary or something. Uh, it was, I remember Taming of the Prince came out in 89, so 20th anniversary of it or something like that, a couple years ago, of the Taming of the Prince. And why it's and um, um, and he kind of dealt with that chapter. He dealt with the section of Aristotle and Aristotle's offices. And the other person who did some good work on this question of the offices and this executive is Melissa Lane. I think Melissa Lane in her essays on Greek thought. What is that thing? What is it? The British translation is Greek and Roman political ideas, right? By Penguin. That's the British edition. I forget what the English name was. The American edition of it. It's published both in English and American by Penguin. Penguin in the UK and I think Princeton in the US. Uh, again, this is two different approaches. Mansfield Taming the Prince is kind of Straussian. Um, uh, where Machiavelli plays a big role in the shaping of modern executive. I think he's right on this, and the evolution of taming of it in that sense. So that that there is this idea that the ancients didn't have a concept of the executive. It's silent, is missing. And I think there is something to be said here that but I also think that's because here we do see an executive. We see the proto aspect of it in terms of the magistrates, the offices. It's not a unitary executive in that sense. Aristotle really gives the more attention here to the again, it isn't called legislative, but it's called deliberative, the deliberating officer. So let's look at this. So we look at these three offices, and right, he said the deliberative, the offices, the magistrates, we say the offices which are dealing with what they are, and he gives them out what office should be over what matters. They should have authority and what fashion, how they choose them, and the third adjudicative. So he starts with the deliberative element. The deliberate element has authority concerning war and peace, alliance and illusions, laws, judicial cases carrying the penalties of laws, death. Therefore, see, that's why he adds that little thing. This is why brackets of their delusions, alliances and their delusions, laws, death or exile or confiscation, and the choosing and auditing of officials. So let's look at this, right? This is concerning war and peace. War and peace, alliances and their delusion, laws, the issues, and this is mean the judicial cases of this, right? Deciding of these cases, I think, of death, exile, or confiscation, and the choosing and auditing of officials. The rules about this. This is deliberative. This is the thing, the ultimate, the five aspects of deliberative authority. It is necessary either that all these sorts of decisions be assigned to all citizens, that all be assigned to some citizen of the citizen. In other words, okay, can I say it is necessary either that all these sorts of decisions be assigned to all citizens, that they be assigned to some citizens, for example, by assigning all to one particular office or several, or to some and some to others, or that some of them be assigned to all citizens and others to some. So, all to all, right? All decisions be to all of them. All be assigned to some citizens, or this mixed, all to be assigned to some to be assigned to. So all, some, all, some to all, and some to others to some. Okay, some to all, and some to some. Right, others, all. Some to some and some to others, or that they or some of them be assigned to all of the citizens, right? So this is that division of here, right? That all be assigned to some citizens. For example, by assigning all to a particular office or several, or some to some and some to others, or that some of them to be assigned to all citizens and others to some. Okay, right? Now that all decide concerning all is characteristic popular. So again, all to all, that everyone, all the decisions are given to everybody to decide. This is the most popular. For the peoples seek this sort of equality, but there are several modes in which all decides. One is by turns, other is altogether, as in the regime of Tethcles of Mitlius. And there are other regimes in which deliberation is carried out by officials meeting jointly, with all entering office by turns from the tribes in the smallest parts of the city until all have gone through. And they meet all together. They meet only concerning legislation and matters affecting the regime, or to listen to announcements by the officials. Now, this is 53. Look at this here. The practice of governing through joint official boards, Sankriki, synarche, sync like sync, arche ruling, right? Like common ruling, right? Joint seem to become fairly common in Aristotle's day. The smallest part referred to here would be the political subdivision of the type of quarters, what them are, right? The demi. Nothing is known of this Thesicles. So again, this is what he says at this point here. This is why we have to look at the idea of how these things structured. So it can be, the deliberative element can be broken up in, like he says, this situation that the most popular one, the one that is the most democratic or the most popular, and he says, is that all to all, right? All all issues are dealt by everyone. Or you can do it this way. The other one is example of the city he mentions, Mytilus, is that they had to do it in turns. And they go through the cycle of this, carrying it out, all entering office by turns. And from the tribes, by tribes he means the demi, the units of here, the demi, the administrative entities. This is not tribe as in the ethnoi, but tribes as in the kind of structures like in Athens, the demi, which was created. It was, Solon divided the city up into these we translate English tribes, but they're not tribes. They're kind of administrative. We would maybe say wards in modern city, American city, the wards and districts, and that therefore, or maybe even groups. The Romans would do it by a class, right? The Romans who did it by class. The Athenians didn't do it by class per se, but by districts, and created these these entities. And the smallest parts of the city until they have, and therefore what happens is they go through turns of the tribes, and that therefore what happens is then everyone goes do it. Everyone will participate in a sense, right? And they only come together to deal with matters of the regime per se, concerning legislation or matters affecting the regime, or to listen to announcements by officials, to hear what they say, right? To gathering of things. We see this in town hall governments in America. That usually the town budget people be all the citizens are asked to come, and then they'll make a, again, this is the leftover from the ancient this ancient conception here. This is another mode is when we all decide together. Another mode is when all decide together, but meet only with a view to the choosing of the officials, legislation, and what concerns war and peace. They'll come together and only discern about specific things like choosing the officials, legislation, and issues of war and peace and audits, while all other matters, deliberation is carried out through offices arranged to deal with each sort of thing. And the offices are chosen uh, 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 from all or by lot. So therefore, you have another way of doing it, is that you come together about some of the most important things, but then the other things are going to be done by any other the other aspects of deliberation not addressed by these larger issues are going to be done by specific offices who are what the office is going to be chosen either through election, which is oligarchic, or lot, which is democratic, right? Another mode, so that's a third, right, or maybe more than a third, is when the citizens get together in connection with offices and audits and to deliberate about war and alliance, while other matters are administered by offices that are chosen by election and to election by the extent possible rather than by lot, okay, instead of lot. Those in which is it is necessary to have knowledgeable person ruling. Therefore, you need to have certain people like generalships, counters, people, the finance, money and war. These are the things you need to have people expert on, or things that you need to have people expert, knowledgeable about the thing to be done. You just can't have a lot of it. In other words, that the people come together. Another is to have modes. The citizens come together in connection with offices and audits. Um, in other words, section officers in audits and deliberate about war and alliance. While other matters, all the other things are done by the office holders. They will decide. They deliberate. And they're chosen by election. Why? Because, and rather by lot, because they have to have knowledge. The fourth mode is when all meet to deliberate about all matters, while the offices decide on nothing but merely make preliminary decisions. Okay. So therefore, this is what everyone deliberate. This mode is everyone all deliberate all matters, and the office decide nothing but merely make uh, decisions about delivering things. Like this is the kind of how do we the questions of implementation. Okay, actually, this is what most legislative models do. That the law make is really again this is the deliberative event. All will meet. All the citizens will meet. This is the mold in which the final sort of democracy. Okay, this is again. We've gone from all the list here of this the fourth mode. Now he says it's the fourth mode, so that's important. It's more fourth. It's the fourth mode. Now he considers that this is what we've given here is a count of the democratic approach to deliberation. This has all been a kind of democratic, popular deliberation, and echoing the four types of democracy, the four types of democratic, the four types of democracy issued in chapter 6. Okay, chapter 6 of book 4. The first democracy, it's farmer democracy, and then the last one is the one the people rule without even law restraining them. A fourth, where they deliberate all matters while their office decide nothing, but leave decisions right. This is the mode in which the final sort of democracy, that sort which we bear companion with dynastic oligarchy and tyrannical monarchy, administrates itself now. So therefore, this is this last. Therefore, again, he's just given us this is the way that if we take the models of regimes of type of regimes and we look at this is how each type of regime deals with deliberation. Okay, all these modes are democratic, while some have, while having some decide is matters in all matters as oligarchic. This too has several varieties, where they are elected on the basis of moderate assessments and are numerous because of moderateness of the assessment, where they do not attempt to change, they attempt change in matters where law forbids it, but instead follows the law, and where it is open to anyone possessing the assessment to take part in deliberation. Such a regime is indeed an oligarchy, but by the part of but by the fact of its moderateness, regime-like. It's regime-like moderateness. Okay, again, this is Palatine. It's regime-like moderateness. It's by its regime-like moderateness. When So that's one. That's this is the idea that this is the initial one where it's moderated. It is that, and it's the first oligarchy. It'll be the first oligarchy, which again echoes the first democracy. This is that weird. Actually, even the first, and what's even more radical would be the forgotten first democracy in chapter 4. Remember, chapter 4 had 5 things, and chapter had 5 forms of democracy. And chapter 4, no, chapter 4 had 5, and chapter 6, which as recounts it, reduces it to 4, where the first one disappears and the second becomes the first, right? And the second, original second, or the second first, is very similar to will be very similar to the first oligarchy in both chapter 5, book 4, chapter 5, and the restatement at book 4, chapter 6, the second part of that. Remember, book 6 first gives the restatement of democracies, the 4, and then the restatements of oligarchy. So what do we have here? This is the first oligarchy. We have, again, we'll get the 4 oligarchies, and then we're going to probably get 4 varieties of this, and that same structure that we had here, right? When all do not take part in this deliberation, but only those elected to do so, and they rule in accordance with the law, this is oligarchy as before. When those who have authority over deliberation elect themselves, and when sons succeed their fathers in office, and they have authority over the laws, this arrangement is necessary, very oligarchic. Okay, right? But when some have matters in some matters, for example, when all have it concerning war and peace and audits, and officials in other matters, being chosen either by election or lot, it is aristocracy or regime. Or this is, or in other words, you have here, this is the blending, right? So therefore, the last arrangement, this is actually interesting because it looks like there's what we get this, and then when all do not take part is this, right? That's the second, and then this is the third, and they have authority over the law. So lawless. So instead of 4 accounts of oligarchy, you get 3 accounts of oligarchy. Now here is then we get the thing of mixed, right? We have some authority, then we have some authority in some matters and all in some, for example, or when it has concerning, or when it have it concerning war and peace audit, and the officials in other matters in being either chosen by election or by lot. This is a regime called regime, maybe the so-called mixture, or aristocracy. So aristocracy and regime are blurred again here, right? If persons chosen by election have authority in some matters, and people chosen by lot in others, with those chosen by lot being chosen either simply from all or from pre-selected groups, or if persons chosen by election and by lot have authority in common. These are the features on the one hand of aristocratic regime, and on the other a regime, okay, a regime called regime, so-called regime. Again, this is that what he does here. Polity is the translation of politea, which is also for regime. This is an interpretation. He shouldn't do this because we should be confused a little bit, we would be in the Greek, to understand what's going on here. So therefore, what is he saying? If it's by lot, if it's by election, it's aristocratic, or if it's by lot, it's then probably the regime, right? I think that's how it works. On the one hand, these features on the one hand. So therefore, if it's chosen, I think it's the question of the pre-selected group or section by all, right? And or by election or by common. So therefore, again, this is this mixture, either either simply from all or pre-selected group, and the persons chosen are either going to be elected, chosen by election or by lot, and have authority in common. This is and the question is, this is again this blended middle point, this either aristocratic or regime, right? The deliberative element is distinguished in relation to the regime in this manner, then. And each regime administers matters in accordance with the definition mentioned. So we defined it in the sense here, the way it operates. We kind of had the account of the democratic, then oligarchic, and then mixed, right? Which deals with that either aristocracy or a regime called regime. Now he goes, in the sort of democracy which is now most particularly to be held as democracy, I mean the sort in which the people have authority even over the laws. It is advantageous with a view to deliberating better to do the same thing that is done in regard to the courts and oligarchies. So therefore, he's saying that you should maybe do it the same thing with the court and oligarchies. For they arrange to fine for non-attendance those they want to have adjudicate, to ensure that they do adjudicate, while the popular sort pays for the poor. This should be done in regard to assemblies as well. In other words, you want everyone. You have to fine non-attendance, and therefore you want to make sure the wealthy have to come. So you fine the wealthy. They and provide pay. You pay. This is something he said earlier. Remember about this. You pay the poor and you fine the rich. Or if you're going to just fine, then you find the poor, but you find the rich more, right? The penalty goes more. This should be done in regard to assemblies as well, right? For all will deliberate better when they do so in common. The people with the notables, and these with the multitude. So again, the idea that they should deliberate in common. They should be forced to deliberate in common. This is kind of an argument. Um, Again, at one level, this sounds democratic, but then you could say, "Oh, this is regime-like." Okay, okay, I understand that. The idea here is that all should. This idea that they should be all should deliberate, all, both the multitude and the notables. Um, and so, therefore, what is done regarding the court should also be done during the assembly. It is also advantageous if those who deliberate are chosen by election or by lot in equal numbers from each part of the city. So either they should be done by election, they should be done is advantageous for those who deliberate. If you want to create a deliberative body, this body, you can create a body that's going to be a deliberative body, then they should be elected into the office, or if it's going to be done by lot, or by lot in equal numbers from parts of the city. And where the popular sort among the citizens greatly exceed the notables in numbers, and where the popular sorts among the citizens exceed the notables in numbers, it is advantageous to either not to provide pay for all, but only for as many as will balance the multitude of notables, or else to exclude the excess by lot from participating. In other words, that you just have a certain number of things and you select by lot. You have a certain number of seats, and then you simply just do here. Now, this is has a note here, 54. The text and meaning is somewhat uncertain. I read politon among the citizens with one manuscript rather than politon, the rulers, right? This is polon, polton, citizens of the citizens versus of the states of the politicians, right? The politon, and with most manuscripts, and Durensinger, retaining politon, the meaning could be either where the popular sort gently exceeds the political sort number, or where the popular sort among political men are greatly exceed the notables in number. The parts of the city referred to here would seem to be administrative divisions such as tribes or quarters, rather than social classes. All these devices are intended to increase the participation of the notables, the upper classes, in decision makings and democracies. Okay, so sorry, that's going to be good. So again, Lord is making this is why this text you can read it in two ways. The manuscript says you can say he gives it the idea of citizens, but he also gives the idea that it could be read. Let's go look over here. Let's go back here for a second. It can be read this way, where the popular sort of men, where the popular sort among the politicians greatly exceed the notables in number. Okay, and therefore the idea here is what? The idea here is you want to balance, and you want to divide it administratively. This idea. This is I can think what this is how the British did it. This is districts. This is electoral districts. We create electoral district. We elect a member from it to represent the thing. Okay, and what they do is they try to do this. They try to also divide it by class, not by class. When Romans did it by class, here he's doing it by district, district, and to divide the districts in a way that to balance out, to ensure that the notables are 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 a greater proportion or an equal proportion of notables and the multitude are part of the deliberative element. So this is again, this is democracy. This is the democratic aspect. He talks about this in that sense. This is how to balance the democratic aspect. In oligarchies, it is advantageous either to elect additionally certain persons from the multitude to serve as officials and to establish on official boards of the sort that exist in some regimes made up of those they call preliminary consuls or lord guardians, and to have a popular assembly that will take up only the business which is considered in the preliminary council. For in this way, the people will share in deliberating, but will not be able to overturn anything connected to the regime. So, therefore, this is one way. You can say oligarchies do this, but the oligarch. This is here. This way, the previous paragraph, and this paragraph, is all about trying to. This is why some people say, "Oh, this is about creating the mixed regime." No, again, it continues on. What he's doing here is looking at the offices, and he's dealt with how the offices work by the regimes, how they differ, and now he's dealing with the way if you want to uh, balance the regimes from going to the extreme, to prevent the logical extremes of both of the negative consequences of oligarchy and democracy, to the last democracy and the dynastic oligarchy, because both of these are tyrannical in character, and therefore this is not beneficial. Well, I mean, maybe some people this is the only thing that they can be ruled by. Okay, in other words, this is what is fit is some people that only that those kind of some cities will be so constructed that is the only regime that will work for them. So how do you moderate it? How do you even moderate? How do you even take those regimes and you try to make them better by doing some of the things here? Okay, and here for the oligarchic, he says what you do is you get them to check some people in there. You create it. You let them have some say in it or some overview, so that you elect the board of the primary consulars and like this. You take you include some members of the multitude in those things, and then what you have is then you let and have popular assembly. That people have assembly, and that they get to what they do is they'll ratify and vote on they'll either approve or audit what was agreed by the preliminary consulars, right, or law guardians. In that way, the people have share in deliberating, but will not overturn anything connected to the regime. Okay, in other words, they can't overturn the regime. Further, it is advantageous to have the people vote on measures which are either the same as those brought before them by the preliminary council, or not contrary to them, or to allow all to advise, but the officials to deliberate. So therefore, this is another one. It's advantageous to have people vote on measures which are either the same as brought before those things. They can vote on them. They can, in other words, the people vote on these measures before them, are not contrary to them, or to allow them to advise, but the officials deliberate, but allow all to advise. So therefore, this is you get them able to have a vote on it. That's one way. These guys make a decision. They did, and they can vote on it, but they can't vote something contrary to what was a thing. So they can't. If it says we're going to do this, and they says no, we're going to do not that. The opposite thing of it. Okay, contrary to it. Okay. No, it's going to either do it or don't do it. Pass it or don't pass it. Not do anything else. Okay, it's this limited aspect is what he's saying here. Or what? That they can advise and let the council deliberate. These preliminary council deliberate, right? Here, the opposite of what occurs in regimes should be done. Okay, the multitude should be given authority to veto measures, but not to pass their own. These being referred to the officials. In other words, that they can veto, but not, introduce and do a new one. They can block, but can't introduce legislation and produce their own. In other words, the multitude can be given the authority to veto. Again, this is the Roman idea of the tribute, right? They elected the tribute, and the tribute could veto, stop legislation. The Roman tributes, right? The idea that they could block, veto, but not initiate legislation and pass it. Measures of the latter sort are always referred to the many. In other words, that these measures of the latter sort are so they can veto but not pass them. Right. The converse is done with is also this idea of the rule of the many in that sense. Concerning the deliberative and authoritative element of the regime, then let our discussion stand as this manner. So this ends the discussion of the deliberative element. Now, what he's doing here, he's really trying to understand. The deliberative element is this. Now, in Aristotle's time, and the early democracies, they were small enough that you could have the assemblies and people get together. In modern times, we don't do this representation. But what is representation really? Representative models are office. When you elect, he's even said it. You elect these office holders. You create a preliminary council. So what we do is we elect members of Congress or members of Parliament, right? That therefore those are offices. These are offices of that. They're in charge of. They're the deliberative offices. The deliberative offices is the offices that we would call legislative, right? Modern world, our modern language would call it legislative, but they are elected by now either we have different modes. We either divide everything in districts, either natural districts or artificial districts. Sometimes you have some countries will have that the whole district is this way. Again, therefore, this is actually one could argue this is the way. If you did one district, like some countries, like in Slovakia, you have one district, and that they elect the parliament members by this one district. Right? So sometimes they break it up, right? But why would you break it up? You break it up either they're artificial districts to regions, or they're natural in terms of the territorial entities. The English system was the counties. The counties were the structures of the parliamentary boundaries, and therefore they each county had representation in parliament. Maybe two. They'd break the county in two wards, two districts, maybe more. And therefore they would represent, the constituencies would elect a member to represent them. This is representative. And this is what he's talking about, representative. In other words, this is an aspect. There's either direct rule that all participate. This is the most radical understanding. Or that you would elect someone to an office. That's the difference between what he talks about, that either all participate or some will participate. Some means representative structures. That they're going to select some, not everyone, but some. So, you have the idea that we talk about is like either participatory democracy and things like this, that we have referendum and things like that. Well, okay, you can have, but the idea that you're going to get everyone together, okay, this leads us to a problem. This is something that people like Vincent Pareto and also Genovese Mosca and Robert Michels talked about. The Italian school guys talked about the problem of participation. That you can't, as the body politic grows too large, it becomes impossible to include everyone. It just won't work. Everyone can't participate. It just won't work. It will just break down. Just think about this. Imagine. Just think about it. Everyone's going to have 10 minutes to talk. So if the population is 20, if 20,000 people come to a meeting, and everyone has 10 minutes, you know what the problem goes? Okay. And therefore not everyone's, and also we have to understand the difference of people's capacity to engage in these kind of things. Not everyone is going to be talkative or active in speaking and things like this. Then this is the problem with the Greek democracy. It's the tyranny of the eloquent. The eloquent and people who go up there are going to be the ones who speak and have the authority. Aristotle's very doesn't address Aristotle here is leaves it as this: that the more radical conception is we want radical participation. This is the last democracy. This is the last. This is the last democracy. That's and therefore, and also he says this is the regime that is most common in of democracies and at the time he's writing. Um, so we end here with that discussion of this. See, this is next where we go over here, right? This will be chapter 15. Um, we end here. We end with a discussion of the nature of the deliberative element, the deciding element. We talked about the character of democrat, how it echoes the four accounts of democracy, and it also echoes of the oligarchy, but a little less. It has only three specific forms of the oligarchy, and therefore, what one would argue is that the last one, either the last one is divided in two, that where at first it will obey the law and then later it won't, right? Or that it increasingly becomes more and more oligarchic, I mean, dynastically oriented. So that's an interesting aspect of that. Then he talks about the so-called regimes, right, and aristocracies, which are these a mixture of things, which again all regimes are mixtures in this sense. Again, because he blurs aristocracy and what Lord and most translators call polity, but it's regime. The regime called regime. Um, it's popular rule, and he argues that there's blending, and then the argument here is that this is how you actually fix how you make a oligarchic regime, a democratic regime, moderate itself, right? Moderate itself towards a more effective regime, stable regime, prevent the extremes. Mm-hmm. And he offers solutions and various ways to do it, right? And structures. So that ends it. Now that's where we're going to stop here. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below, and I will see when I see them. I will answer them. Okay. Um, if you have any questions again about what we covered here, or maybe you want to ask me about a question about the politics that you'd like answered, um, please put them down there. If you liked it, like it. Okay, share it with a friend. Share it, please. If you didn't like it, you can down it and just say why. What's wrong? The other thing is um, you can follow me in social media. Links below. Um, Also, if you want to help, because remember Facebook is charging us now. My site is big enough that I have to start paying them per month to keep my thing up there. And I'm now again at over 50%. I'm going to be growing the channel more in terms of the number of like this product is a big project, and I don't want to start deleting things. And I have the next goal is the next site is the Montesquieu, which I was going to start. I have to finish this first, so um, we'll start this Montesquieu, and then maybe we do the Machiavelli. I might just do the Machiavelli as a kind of quick thing on the side and just start doing it, uploading it, replacing it. But who knows? Because people complain about the text not being present. So that's when you can help by doing subscribe sharp or Patreon. Of course, you say, but you haven't, do rewards and things like this. Okay, yes, yeah. When I have people there, I will do something for you guys. If you do want to set something up like that, but no, if you build it, I will be there. I'll do things. I'm a good boy in that sense. Um, you could another way you can help is you can always send money by or whatever. Um, you can buy my book by Lulu. This is a notebook for Aristotle's politics. This is a commentary. This is not a commentary. It is it's kind of like Cliff's Notes, but it's not a mere summary of the book. It offers what it is. It's a workbook. It's kind of like a study guide to go through it. It offers chapter by chapter, book and chapter by chapter by chapter kind of outline structures of things, some guidance to how to understand the text, guidance about approaching, understanding, seeing the elements of the text, guiding your way through the reading of the text. It offers secondary bibliography for those about what's on topics even that may be useful. This is from not my own. I got that from a friend. Um, I added some stuff to it, but and I removed the purely things that most people would not be able to access because of foreign languages. Some of the things are in German or Russian and other things that I just said, okay, only English language, I'd say. This is again, you want to buy it, you buy it by Lulu. I get the money. I'll get more money for it. But if you buy, I mean, I'll still get some money if you buy Amazon or the publishers. But if you buy by Lulu, I get what those distributors, those stores get. So again, that's why you can help if you want to. Well, that's it. That's my little spiel at the end. I hope you all will turn next to chapter 15, which will deal with the offices, the functionary officer, magisterial offices in that sense. Um, that's it for the day. Have a good one, and I will see you tomorrow or see you in the next session. Have a good day and take care. Bye bye.